Hey guys, welcome back here to Advanced Bass Fishing. Appreciate you guys tuning in for today's video. And guys, today I'm going to tell you how you can judge the size of a fish by how it bites your lure. In terms of like when, say for example, you're fishing a plastic worm and you know you got a bite, you can feel the fish on there. I'm going to explain to you how you can pretty accurately judge the weight of that fish just by the way the fish bites the lure. So we're going to get into that in today's episode here. I'm also got a quick reminder, you probably heard me talking about it earlier this week, but I just wanted to share with you guys this new bait from Megabass. Guys, this is that Megabass Level Swimmer Spy Bait here. This is one of the top wintertime bass fishing lures that you can throw, or for smallmouth in the summertime. Real diminutive, it's got like a little shimmy in the water that goes through the water like that with the prop spinning. It's really good anytime you're catching fish, like on a jerk bait, an Alabama rig, or a little swim bait. The little spy bait's good. So I'll put this in my Tackle Warehouse link in the description if you guys would like to try a couple of those spy baits out. It's a really fun, easy way to fish. Man, just throw it out there on a point, let it sink down 5 or 6 feet, and just slow crank it in. You'll just feel just like a tick on your line when they hit it. So much appreciated with that. Okay, one of the things that I've learned about bass fishing, and I learned this from practicing for tournaments in bass fishing where I didn't want to hook the fish. And what I do in practice a lot of times, let's say for example, I'm flipping a jig or flipping a Texas rig worm or a creature bait or something, and I catch a fish or two, and I don't want to hook the fish because the tournament's coming up the next day. I'll just cut the hook off. I'll cut the barb of my hook off, or the point of it where it's just a shank there. And then I'll fish, and if I feel a bite, I can just shake the fish off and not stick the fish and increase my odds of catching that fish the next day of the tournament. So this is how I figured out the size of the fish based upon doing this, shaking fish off and catching fish that I feel, bite the lure. So this is what I want to explain to you guys. First of all, one of the things about getting a bite on any type of, and this video is pretty much for slow mover lures, like your drop shot, shaky head, Ned rig, Texas rig worms, football head jigs, creature baits, all the baits you're working on the bottom like that. We're not talking really about crankbaits here, topwaters. Here's how I learned how to do that. First of all, a lot of people say, I've heard people say, it's like, they'll set the hook and they'll miss a fish and they'll say, oh man, he spit it out. I didn't set the hook soon enough. That's a myth in bass fishing, guys. If you have a decent fish, like anything over 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds, most of the time you can't hardly get that bait away from the fish if you get a bite. 9 times out of 10, if you get a bite like on a worm and it's a fish that's 2 pounds or bigger, they're gonna swim forever with it, and sometimes they'll swallow it and they won't spit it out. You can shake them off sometimes and pull it out of their mouth without a hook, but it's pretty difficult to get a fish to drop a bait. So that's one of the things I always tell people about, don't get in a big hurry to set the hook because you got plenty of time. Just get yourself in position and set the hook right. You don't have to be like a live nerve ending setting it immediately. Okay, so here's how you can feel and tell the difference on a jig bite or worm bite or any type of a slow moving bite. When you get the bite out there, and if it's a smaller fish, say the fish is less than 1.5 pounds or so, one of the things you're going to notice on it is you're going to feel like you're going to feel the bite, like something's sort of pecking at it a little bit. And a lot of times this is because a smaller fish is like biting the tail of it like that and sort of like biting at the worm. They're not inhaling the whole thing. They're sort of just biting it. So a small fish, a lot of times like that, you'll feel like a little bite, and then you'll feel the line start moving out a little bit. And a lot of times, you can, when your line's moving out there, your line's sort of going in a straight line. Okay, that's on a small fish. Now the difference is if you got a good fish, and say you got a 4 or 5 pound bass, when that fish comes in on that bait, most of the time it's swimming down to that bait. Say for example, this is your jig right here. Say a little fish comes up and pecks the trailers out there and he's moving out with it. When a quality fish comes up to a jig like that, they're gonna look at that thing and they're either just gonna bite the whole thing or they're gonna flare their gills and suck that whole bait into their mouth. Therefore, the strike a lot of times is gonna occur in one or two ways. You're gonna be working that jig or that slow bait, and all of a sudden you're gonna see your line tick like that. Your line's gonna jump in the air. When that happens, that means that bass has inhaled that bait flared its gills and then held that bait with water through its gills and pulled that bait back, making your line look like it flicked like that. Other times when a quality fish comes up there and bites that, they'll bite the whole lure and then they start swimming away with it. And when a big fish swims, or a quality fish, they swim like this. Their tail's moving like that. So the thing that you're gonna notice on a quality fish, let's say you're working that bait and all of a sudden you see your line tick, or say for example, that fish just grabs the thing and you see your line start moving out. If you watch your line is gonna move a little bit sideways like that. On a small fish, it's just gonna go straight, but on a bigger fish, it's gonna slowly and subtly move like that. That's because the length of that fish and that tail moving like that, the wider the swath of the line moving through the water, the bigger that fish is with the tail moving. So when I get a strike there and I see that line moving out, if I see that line moving, if I notice that line moving like that, I know I'm getting ready to get a good fish. And then also a lot of times, if you put pressure on a bigger fish like that, you can feel the weight of it. The fish, like especially if you start pulling into it like that, and I've done this a lot without a hook, and you pull into that fish pulls back on it like that. And on a little fish, a lot of times, when you pull back on that a little bit, the fish will come to you, and a lot of times they'll spit it out. On a big fish moving away from you, you're not gonna pull it back. Your rod's just gonna bend forward like that, and you know it's a quality fish. So that's how I can tell how big a fish is, by shaking them off. It's like, I can tell in a tournament, if I'm flipping a jig down a row of trees or docks and something like that, and I get 10 or 15 bites without my hook on there, I can pretty much guess within about half a pound of how big those fish are, just based upon how my lines move. And that's something that I've developed over year after year after year. Okay, now a couple different things on a topwater, like on a topwater lure or swim bait or crankbait or anything you're moving through the water like that. If you're reeling a crankbait just like that through the water, and all of a sudden it just gets heavy, like you've caught a limb on it and you pull into it and it's heavy, that's usually quality fish. A lot of times if you're reeling that crankbait and one hits it hard like that, a lot of times that's a small fish. Another time on a topwater lure, some of the biggest topwater fish that you're gonna catch, like you're working that Zara spook through the top, a lot of the big ones don't come up and just annihilate it. They come up like this and they get underneath it and they just boil on it. It's almost like they're sucking the water down into it and sucking that topwater under. It may look like a smaller fish, but it's not. I'll give you guys one example. I was fishing a tournament in November up at Lake of the Ozarks many years ago. Water was pretty cold for a topwater, but I was fishing a buzzer. And in practice, I was throwing the buzz bait with no hook because I was getting a few bites. And I started noticing, it's like I'd get a bite with the buzz bait and it's like the fish had come up and hit it so soft that there wouldn't hardly be any disturbance. And I'm like, man, those are dinks. I'm not catching any good fish here. It's like, you know, there's no blow up. I'd just be reeling that buzzer and all of a sudden it just sort of disappear into the water. In the tournament, I wound up catching 22 pounds the first 2 days of the tournament. They were all big ones that were doing that because those were big fish that were coming up and sucking that bait underneath from the top by flaring their gills. They weren't just like annihilating it. So there's some clues that you can get on how big a fish is like that. It's just time on the water and experimentation, but just wanted to share that little tidbit of info with you guys, and appreciate you tuning in. We'll talk later.